So after Terrifier 2 and Saw X, it looks like we have another horror sequel that's way better than it has any right being. Alright guys, welcome back. GM Light here. I just got back from seeing Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. It pretty much follows the events of the first movie with Christopher Robin escaping, Pooh and the rest of the gang getting desperate, and them wanting revenge. But instead of directly following the first one, it actually kind of cleverly retcons it. What's funny is that they actually make the first movie an in-universe telling of the events of the first one, and that kind of allows them to pick and choose what they want, keep the bones of the first movie, keep those canon, and move the story forward. But they could also redesign Pooh, Piglet, Christopher Robin, work out some of the things that didn't work the first time, and then just proceed forward. This also leads to actually some pretty hilarious self-deprecating moments regarding the first movie, and I really appreciated that, especially as someone who's been following these movies since their inception and kind of everything surrounding them. We're kind of getting straight through the shallow stuff. This is an improvement. If you're a horror fan, there's plenty of great kills. It's an entertaining movie. Pretty large improvement over the first one, even though I'll say I have some dumb fun with that first movie. I actually kind of enjoy it. I even gave it kind of a positive review last year, but this movie takes everything about that first movie. It feels like they reanalyzed, went back to the drawing board, and figured out a way that they could deliver a better story, better characters, better script, everything. And just overall, it's a better experience. There's great practical effects for both the monsters, but also for the gore. There's some pretty nasty, cringy scenes, and it's just good entertainment. And with the monsters, they also kind of change up the characterization, and you feel like there actually is motivation behind this. In the first movie, you kind of get glimmers of that with Pooh, with a little bit of his emotions, his humanity, kind of that loss of it and how it affects him. Just a tiny bit, but in this movie, it feels like it's a pervasive thing. In that first movie, when Pooh kills, he feels a little mechanical, just kind of like a guy killing, doing it. But in this one, there's a little bit of a viciousness to him when he kills, and it feels like that's because he's almost lashing out at the world, lashing out at humanity. And when he kills, it feels like that's his go-to, his motivation, and what drives him. And you feel that in the way that he does things. Kind of similar to the way that Art the Clown, he takes absolute glee in killing people. He enjoys it. You could tell he enjoys it. You could tell that there's some anger behind Pooh when he's killing people. And that was kind of a great direction, I would say, that they took. But at the center of this movie, what I think really was the big improvement, the thing that sold me on it, what was my favorite thing of the movie, was Scott Chambers, his performance as Christopher Robin. In another version of this movie, I could have easily seen him being kind of portrayed as broody, just brooding around his parents' house, moody, messed up from the first movie, or maybe like paranoid or whatever. But he's actually played in a way where he's almost this goofy, light guy who's been through this terrible thing. And I'd say Scott Chambers plays this part of him really well, where you see that lightness is still there, he still has it, and he is that guy, but there's pain behind those eyes. You could feel that other part of him that hurt, and he still retains that lightness despite everything that he's been through, what happened in the first movie, and what he constantly has to go through as a pariah in this town. It overall makes him a lot more realistic and relatable than the version of the character that I could imagine, this broody version that I'm making up, that I would have imagined that a lot of other movies would have chosen to do. But while, you know, that broody version would be annoying, kind of abrasive, usually lash out at people, it makes you really feel for this version that he does keep this chin-up attitude despite what's going on, and you really feel for him when all these bad things happen to him and continue to happen to him. The character grounds the movie in reality, and although this movie strikes the right balance between having fun with this concept, I think this is what keeps it from going into full parody mode, because it feels like overall, though this is just a ridiculous concept, this feels grounded in a reality. It just happens to be a reality where Pooh and Piglet and the rest of the gang are all killers. But since it operates on that reality and these feel like real characters dealing with these things, it allows you to get more invested into it. And I guess it's not really fair to compare Scott Chambers to the actor in the first movie who played Christopher Robin, especially considering that that guy spent 90% of his screen time in the first one screaming because he's being tortured. But that is my one takeaway, my one thing that I think that I walked away from this movie saying that was the best part. Just the realness of it is something that I hope they maintain with this whole poohniverse movie, because that feels like it could go off the rails into parody. I just hope that they keep the spirit of this one in mind, keep that whole character thing based and lined. With a movie like that, I could see it very much being harder to strike that balance than with some of these more contained movies with these concepts. But other standout characters, I would say, are definitely Owl and Tigger. There were a lot of great moments, sequences with both of them, and it also allowed them to have these different powers, almost I want to say different abilities. Their methods of how they stalk people and kill them are very different from Pooh and Piglet's, and that can make it more fun. It allows for a little bit more of kind of just diversity in how this movie dispatches of people. So I found those parts very entertaining, especially too, I gotta say Tigger definitely had a very Freddy Krueger influenced personality and approach to him. I don't want to go too much into it, but I definitely could see the influence there. But that's just all to say they added these characters and implemented them well into the movie. It was organic and it didn't feel forced or overstuffed the movie. Although I'll say one of my complaints is that Piglet gets very much shortchanged, kind of lost in the mix in this movie because of that. But I guess some of the toughness with that character in particular is that he's a little bit too similar to Pooh. But it is these characters and the explanations that they go through in this movie that makes it a lot easier for me to envision what poohniverse, it's hard to say. Poohniverse, picturing what it actually is, what it's going to be in the direction that they're headed in for that movie. I could actually kind of see it. It feels a little bit more tangible, whereas a day ago, I pictured this crazy ass movie that's very silly. I think I could actually see a version where this works, where it would actually make sense for these characters to meet without going into it. This movie kind of gives you a little bit of that while also not suffering from Iron Man 2 syndrome. Fucking weird as hell to compare this movie to Iron Man 2, but you know what I mean. It doesn't over-rely on the Pooh universe setups and all that. It doesn't bog down the movie. This is very much its own movie. It's good that they were smart and just focused on improving, making this movie better before they're going full hog into the Poohniverse and shared shit, because that could have totally collapsed this movie. You know, I have some complaints. Obviously, this movie's not perfect. I wish there was more Piglet. Although I know why they're not doing it, I do want to see Pooh speak a little bit more. You know, I don't know if that would really work, but the quips and stuff were really left up to Owl and Tigger. There's a little bit of CGI blood, you know, that's some of the limitations of the budget. I just think that there's only so much that they could do. This movie's still very cheap to make, so there is kind of a cap to what they can do, and that's just pretty much the thing of this. There really is just a cap to what you can do with a Winnie the Pooh horror movie. And just overall, you know, I can't recommend this to everybody, but the best thing that I can say about it is that this movie really understands its audience, and it does everything that it can to provide them the experience that they want. They listen to the criticisms, good and bad. They took it to heart, and what I really have to commend these guys on is that they did take it to heart. They listened. They did everything to make this movie the best that it could be and improve on the first one in pretty much every way. As a horror fan, I had a great time watching this movie. I was very impressed with Scott Chambers as Christopher Robin, and I just overall had a great time watching this movie. If you're a horror fan, if you didn't like the first movie, still give this one a chance, because I think that a lot of horror fans will be turned around on this sequel. It looks like a lot of people are already. I'm seeing some positive feedback online, but just overall, I very much enjoyed this movie. Happy to see these guys did so well, improve, and I'm happy for them. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. I'd love to hear. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.